Imagine your daily jog, your safe haven. Suddenly, flashing lights. You live here, but because you're black, you're suspicious. Feel Aaliyah's fear and fury as police harass her on her own street. Just another injustice destined for silence? Think again. Witness the shocking, lightning-fast intervention when the mayor's office gets wind of it and shuts the profiling down cold. Discover the power, the politics, and the fight for belonging in a story that demands attention. The late afternoon sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the manicured lawns of Oak Creek. It was Aaliyah Johnson's favorite time to run. The heat of the August day had begun to soften, replaced by a nascent coolness that whispered promises of evening. Her feet, clad in well-worn running shoes, struck the pavement of Elm Street with a steady, familiar rhythm: thump-thump, inhale, thump-thump, exhale. This rhythm was her metronome, the beat against which she measured the unwinding of her day as a senior urban planner for the city, the shedding of zoning codes and budget projections, the reclaiming of her own body and breath. Oak Creek wasn't the neighborhood she'd grown up in. That was a vibrant, tightly knit black community across town, now grappling with the double-edged sword of revitalization and gentrification. She and her husband, Ben Carter, a high school history teacher with a passion for uncovering local narratives, had bought the modest brick colonial on Elm Street 5 years ago. They were drawn by the mature trees, the decent schools, and the hope of finding a stable, integrated community where their future children could thrive. They were one of maybe a dozen black families sprinkled amongst predominantly white neighbors in this older, established part of the city. Aaliyah knew the route by heart. Past the Prestons' perfectly sculpted rose bushes, Mrs. Henderson's perpetually cluttered porch swing, the corner where the elementary school kids waited for the bus, their morning chatter a bright counterpoint to her usual pre-work tension. She'd logged hundreds, maybe thousands of miles on these sidewalks. She waved at Mr. Gable tending his prize-winning tomatoes, offered a polite nod to the occasional dog walker. She was a fixture, familiar, part of the neighborhood's mundane tapestry, or so she thought. Today, her mind was churning over a particularly contentious public meeting about a proposed affordable housing project. The coded language, the barely veiled resistance cloaked in concerns about traffic and property values, it was exhausting. The run was meant to clear her head, to sweat out the frustration. She pushed her pace slightly, rounding the bend near Willow Park, the small green space that anchored the neighborhood. Her breathing was deep and even, her muscles warm and responsive. This was her sanctuary, her moving meditation. That's when she saw it. The police cruiser, gliding slowly down the opposite side of the street. It wasn't an unusual sight. Patrols were fairly regular. But then it did something unusual. It made a slow, deliberate U-turn, its tires crunching softly on the asphalt, and began pacing her from behind. Aaliyah's internal metronome faltered. A cold prickle, sharp and unwelcome, traced its way up her spine. Ignore it, she told herself. You live here. You're just jogging. She kept her eyes fixed forward, focusing on the familiar crack in the sidewalk ahead, the one shaped vaguely like the state of Florida. But the cruiser stayed with her, its engine a low growl that seemed to amplify in the quiet street. Crept closer, matching her pace exactly. 10 yards back. 5 yards. Close enough now that she could feel the vibration, sense the scrutiny. Her heart rate, previously elevated by exertion, now hammered with a different kind of energy. Adrenaline, fear, and a rising tide of indignation. This isn't happening, she thought, though the evidence was undeniable, crawling right behind her. Not here. Not on Elm Street. She forced herself to keep running, maintaining her pace, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter or look back. But the sanctuary was breached. The steady rhythm was shattered, replaced by the jarring beat of anxiety. Every shadow seemed deeper, every familiar house suddenly alien. She was hyper-aware of her own body, her black skin, her athletic build, her bright pink running top. What did they see? A resident? Or a threat? Finally, the cruiser pulled alongside her, passenger window humming down. Ma'am, a voice called out, sharp and official. Need you to stop, please. Aaliyah slowed, her breath catching in her throat. She stopped jogging, turning to face the car, hands instinctively going to her hips, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. 2 officers sat inside. The driver, older, with a weathered face and tired eyes, leaned across the passenger seat. The passenger, younger, clean-shaven, watched her with an unnervingly blank expression. Driver's name tag read Wilson. Passengers, Davis. Is there a problem, officers? Aaliyah asked, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. We had a report, Officer Wilson said, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering for a moment on her running attire. Suspicious person in the area. Matches your description. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. Suspicious? I'm jogging. I live 2 blocks from here. On this street, that's so? Wilson's tone was skeptical. He didn't ask for her address. Mind showing us some ID? The cold prickle intensified. I'm jogging, she repeated, trying to keep the edge out of her voice. I don't carry my wallet when I run. Who did? Convenient, Wilson muttered. Officer Davis shifted slightly, his hand resting near his belt. Look, Aaliyah said, forcing herself to stay calm, remembering Ben's constant, weary reminders about de-escalation. My name is Aaliyah Johnson. I live at 412 Elm Street. My husband, Ben Carter, is home. You can follow me there if you need verification. We'll decide what we need, Wilson said curtly. What were you doing running around here? Running around here? The indignation flared, hot and sharp. I was jogging. Like I do almost every day. In my own neighborhood. Lot of break-ins recently, Officer Davis chimed in, his voice smoother than Wilson's but no less accusatory. People casing houses. I wasn't casing anything, Aaliyah snapped, the effort at calm failing. I was exercising. She could feel eyes on them now. Mrs. Henderson had paused her sweeping on her porch down the street. A car slowed as it passed. Humiliation washed over her, thick and suffocating. Why don't you just tell us where you were coming from, where you were going? Wilson pressed, his tone hardening. I was running my usual loop. Aaliyah gestured vaguely. Down Maple, across Oak, back up Elm. Like always, Wilson echoed, skepticism dripping from his words. He exchanged a look with Davis. All right, ma'am. Stay right here. Don't move. He picked up his radio, his voice dropping into clipped, coded language. Aaliyah stood frozen on the sidewalk, acutely aware of the setting sun glinting off the badge, the weight of their scrutiny, the eyes of her neighbors. The familiar street felt hostile now, the trees like silent, judgmental witnesses. The rhythm of her run, the peace she sought, felt a million miles away, replaced by the sickening thrum of injustice. She wasn't Aaliyah Johnson, urban planner, wife, resident. In this moment on her own street, she was just suspicious person, description matched. And the weight of that label, heavy and suffocating, pressed down on her chest, stealing her breath more effectively than any run ever could. Down the street, hidden partly by her overgrown hydrangea bush, Agnes Albright, 82 years old and a resident of Elm Street for 55 of them, watched the interaction with a knot tightening in her stomach. She'd seen Aaliyah run by countless times. Knew her face, knew her house. She didn't know her well, just polite waves and occasional small talk about the weather, but she knew Aaliyah belonged here. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her despite the warm evening that what she was witnessing felt deeply wrong. She saw Aaliyah's rigid posture, the set of her jaw, the flash of fear and anger in her eyes, even from a distance. She saw the officer's casual authority, the way the cruiser hemmed Aaliyah in. Agnes clutched the handle of her watering can, the metal cool against her wrinkled palm, and felt a familiar, uncomfortable pang of helplessness mixed with a nascent sense of outrage. The radio crackled. Wilson listened, grunted a response, then turned back to Aaliyah, his expression unchanged. All right, we're clear for now. No apology. No explanation. Just dismissal. Clear. Aaliyah echoed, disbelief warring with a desperate urge to just get away. Clear of what? Of jogging while black in my own neighborhood? Wilson's eyes narrowed. You want to push this, ma'am? Officer Davis shifted again, a subtle but clear signal. Aaliyah clamped her mouth shut, the words she wanted to scream lodging in her throat like stones. She could see Mrs. Henderson still watching, another neighbor peering through their blinds. The humiliation burned hotter. Just be on your way, Wilson said, his tone implying he was doing her a favor. The cruiser's window hummed up, sealing them back in their air-conditioned bubble of authority. They pulled away from the curb slowly, then accelerated down the street, leaving Aaliyah standing alone on the sidewalk, trembling not from cold but from a volatile mix of fury and residual fear. She didn't resume her run. The rhythm was gone. The sanctuary defiled. She walked the remaining 2 blocks home, each step heavy, her mind replaying the encounter, dissecting every word, every look, the casual suspicion, the demand for ID she couldn't possibly have, the implication that her presence, her very existence in this space, was inherently questionable. She pushed open her front door, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood usually a comfort now doing nothing to soothe her frayed nerves. Ben looked up from the armchair in the living room, a book open on his lap, his brow furrowing at the sight of her face. Aaliyah? What's wrong? You're back early, and you look, he trailed off, rising quickly. The carefully constructed dam of control crumbled. Tears welled, hot and stinging. They stopped me, Ben, she choked out, the words tumbling over each other. The police. Right here. On Elm Street. Said I was suspicious. Ben's face hardened. A familiar storm gathering in his eyes. The storm of a man who taught the painful history of racial injustice and saw its echoes constantly reverberating in the present. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the tremors racked her body. Tell me everything, he said, his voice low and steady, a calming anchor in her turbulent emotions. She recounted the entire incident, the U-turn, the pacing, the questions, Wilson's dismissive tone, Davis's unnerving stillness, the demand for ID, the thinly veiled accusation of casing houses. The utter humiliation of being interrogated on her own street like a common criminal. Ben listened, his jaw tight, his hand rubbing soothing circles on her back. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, the weight of centuries of similar stories heavy in the room. Okay, he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. Okay. First, are you all right? Physically, Aaliyah nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes. Just shaken. And furious. Rightfully so, Ben said. This is bullshit, Aaliyah. Complete, unadulterated profiling bullshit. I know, she whispered. But Ben, they made me feel like I didn't belong here. Like my being here was inherently wrong, which is exactly the point of profiling, Ben said grimly. It's not just about investigation, it's about control. About reinforcing who belongs and who is perpetually out of place. He ran a hand through his hair. We have to report this, Aaliyah. Officially, Aaliyah hesitated. The thought of engaging with the police department again, of filling out forms, of potentially facing Wilson and Davis again, felt exhausting, almost re-traumatizing. What good will it do? They'll say they were following protocol. Investigating a call. Maybe Ben conceded. But there needs to be a record. A pattern needs to be established. How many other suspicious persons have they stopped today who just happen to be black? Plus, you have their names. Wilson and Davis. That's something. Just then, Aaliyah's phone buzzed. It was Sophia Ramirez, her closest friend since college, now a sharp civil rights attorney. They had plans for a video call later, but Aaliyah needed her now. Hey! Sophia's cheerful voice came through the speaker. Ready to debrief about the housing meeting? Can we talk about something else first? Aaliyah's voice was still thick with emotion. Something just happened. She recounted the story again, Sophia listening intently, her usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a focused intensity. Oh, hell no, Sophia said when Aaliyah finished. Absolutely not. On Elm Street? Aaliyah, this is textbook. Racial profiling, unlawful stop, potentially. Did they say what the suspicious person description was? No, Aaliyah admitted. Just that I matched it, which likely means black person in a predominantly white neighborhood, Sophia said dryly. Okay. Ben's right. You have to file a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. Immediately. Get it on record. Aaliyah sighed. It feels so draining. And hopeless sometimes. I know, Sophia said, her voice softening with empathy. Believe me, I know. I deal with this crap every day. But think about it this way. If you don't report it, Wilson and Davis get away scot-free. They feel emboldened. They do it again. Maybe next time it's not just questioning. Maybe next time someone gets hurt. Your complaint might not change the world overnight, but it's a data point. It's evidence. It's a crack in the blue wall. Aaliyah looked at Ben, who nodded encouragingly. The urban planner in her recognized the logic. Data points mattered. Patterns emerged from accumulated evidence. Systemic change required systemic documentation. Okay, Aaliyah said, taking a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it. Can you help me with the wording? Make sure I hit all the legal points? Absolutely, Sophia said immediately. Draft something tonight while it's fresh. Every detail you can remember. Send it to me. We'll make sure it's ironclad. Later that evening, sitting at their dining room table, Aaliyah typed out the complaint, her fingers flying across the keyboard, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, albeit one tinged with weariness. She detailed the time, the location, the officers' names, their words, their demeanor, the lack of justification, the feeling of being targeted. Ben sat beside her, offering quiet support, occasionally suggesting a clarifying phrase based on historical precedents he knew all too well. As she wrote, she thought about the route she ran, the community she was trying to build a life in. Was Oak Creek truly the integrated haven she'd hoped for, or was it just a place with a veneer of tolerance that cracked under the slightest pressure? The cruiser's U-turn felt symbolic now, a sharp deviation from the path of normalcy, revealing an underlying current she could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Agnes Albright sat in her dimly lit living room, the television murmuring ignored in the corner. The image of Aaliyah standing on the sidewalk, facing down the police officers, kept replaying in her mind. Agnes had lived through the civil rights movement, had seen the grainy black and white images of police brutality on the news. She'd always considered herself progressive, supportive of equality. But she'd also lived a largely sheltered life here on Elm Street, insulated by her whiteness, her age, her established place in the community. She hadn't intervened. Fear, uncertainty, a lifetime of deferring to authority, especially police authority, had kept her rooted to her porch. But the wrongness of it gnawed at her. Aaliyah wasn't suspicious, she was a neighbor. Agnes knew the officers hadn't asked her, Agnes, if she'd seen anything suspicious. They hadn't canvassed the street. They had simply targeted the black woman running. She picked up her old rotary phone, then set it down again. Who would she even call? What would she say? She felt a familiar impotence, a sense that the world's problems were too big, too entrenched. But then she thought of Aaliyah's face, the mixture of defiance and vulnerability. Agnes had seen injustice, however small scale, happen on her street, and she had stayed silent. The thought left a bitter taste in her mouth. She picked up the phone again, this time dialing her daughter. Maybe, just maybe, talking it through would help her figure out what, if anything, an 82-year-old woman could do. The next morning, Aaliyah, with Sophia's polished draft in hand, walked into the downtown police headquarters. The building felt imposing, sterile, a fortress of institutional power. Filing the complaint with Internal Affairs was an exercise in bureaucratic detachment. A bored-looking sergeant behind thick plexiglass took her statement with minimal eye contact, stamped some forms, and gave her a case number. There was no empathy, no acknowledgement of the gravity of her experience, just procedural coolness. "We'll investigate," the sergeant said noncommittally. "It takes time." Aaliyah walked out feeling vaguely dissatisfied, like she'd thrown a pebble into an ocean, unsure if it would even make a ripple. Sophia had warned her this might happen. IA often functions to protect the department, not police it, she'd said. Don't expect miracles. This is step 1. Back at her own office at the city planning department, Aaliyah struggled to focus. Zoning maps blurred. Budget spreadsheets seemed nonsensical. The encounter kept replaying Wilson's sneer, Davis's blank stare, the feeling of being pinned by their suspicion. She found herself looking over her shoulder, her sense of safety, even in her familiar professional environment, subtly eroded. Word of the incident, however, began to spread through less official channels. Aaliyah had cautiously mentioned it to a couple of trusted neighbors. One of them posted a carefully worded, anonymous query on the Oak Creek neighborhood Facebook group. Anyone else notice an increase in police stops lately, particularly of joggers? Just curious about recent experiences. The responses trickled in, then grew. A few dismissive comments, police are just doing their jobs, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. But others resonated with Aaliyah's experience. Another black resident mentioned being followed by a patrol car while walking home from the bus stop. A Latino father described being questioned while playing with his kids in Willow Park. A pattern began to emerge, faint but discernible, cutting through the neighborhood's placid self-image. Then came a comment that shifted the tone. Agnes Albright, after a long conversation with her daughter and a restless night, had decided to act. Using her real name, she typed slowly but deliberately, "I witnessed part of an incident yesterday evening on Elm Street involving police stopping a young woman who was jogging. I know this young woman, she is a resident here. She was clearly distressed, and from what I observed, the police interaction seemed unwarranted and unnecessarily intimidating. I did not see the beginning, but what I did see troubled me deeply. Perhaps we need to understand better why our neighbors are being treated this way." Agnes's post, coming from a long-term, white resident, carried weight. It sparked a more intense debate. People started asking questions. Was it the same officers? What was the justification? The anonymity dissolved as others, emboldened by Agnes, shared their own names and experiences or offered support. The digital space became a microcosm of the neighborhood's awakening discomfort. Meanwhile, Sophia wasn't content to let the IA complaint languish. Leveraging her own contacts, built over years of battling the system, she made a call to Lena Petrova, the sharp, no-nonsense chief of staff for Mayor Olivia Thompson. Sophia and Lena had crossed paths before on community liaison committees. There was a degree of professional respect. "Lena, Sophia Ramirez here. Got something serious I need to flag for you, off the record for now, but it involves CPD and potential racial profiling in Oak Creek." Lena, known for her efficiency and political astuteness, listened patiently as Sophia outlined Aaliyah's experience and the emerging neighborhood concerns. Lena's office was perpetually juggling crises, but she had a keen sense for issues that could blow up, damaging the mayor's reputation, especially Mayor Thompson's carefully cultivated image as a progressive leader committed to equity. Oak Creek. Lena sounded surprised. "That's usually quiet territory. Send me the details, Sophia. Names, times, the IA complaint number if you have it. Let me look into it." Lena understood optics, but she also possessed a genuine, if pragmatic, sense of fairness. Profiling incidents were a recurring headache, eroding trust between the community and the police, something the mayor was actively trying to rebuild after a controversial police shooting 2 years prior. While Lena made discreet inquiries, Aaliyah received a follow-up call from Internal Affairs. It was a Detective Wilson. No relation to Officer Wilson, he assured her quickly, perhaps sensing the potential irony. His tone was professional but skeptical. He asked clarifying questions that seemed designed to poke holes in her account. "Are you sure Officer Wilson used that exact phrasing? Could you have misinterpreted their demeanor? Were you wearing anything, perhaps dark clothing, that might have seemed suspicious at dusk?" She'd been wearing a bright pink top. The conversation left Aaliyah feeling frustrated and invalidated all over again. It felt less like an investigation and more like an attempt to find reasons to dismiss her complaint. She relayed the conversation to Sophia, who sighed. "Standard playbook," Sophia said. "Minimize, discredit, delay. They hope you'll get tired and drop it. That's why Lena's involvement could be crucial. Political pressure is sometimes the only language these guys understand." Ben, meanwhile, was doing his own research, digging into local news archives and police reports. He found sporadic mentions of complaints about aggressive policing in Oak Creek over the years, often dismissed or resulting in no action. He also found data suggesting Black residents citywide were disproportionately stopped for minor infractions or suspicious activity. "It's not just Wilson and Davis, Aaliyah," he said, showing her the articles. "It's a pattern, a systemic issue baked into the department's culture. Your experience wasn't random. It was predictable." This realization was both infuriating and strangely clarifying. It wasn't just about her, or even just about Oak Creek. It was about a larger, deeply rooted problem. Agnes Albright received a private message on Facebook from Aaliyah thanking her for speaking up. They exchanged phone numbers. When Aaliyah called, Agnes's voice was frail but firm. "I just couldn't stay quiet, dear," Agnes said. "What I saw wasn't right. This has always been a good neighborhood, but maybe we haven't always been good neighbors to everyone. I'm willing to make a formal statement to the police or whoever needs it about what I witnessed." Aaliyah felt a surge of gratitude. Agnes's testimony, the corroboration from a respected white elder, could be powerful. It wasn't just Aaliyah's word against the officers anymore. The ripples were spreading. The official channels were clogged with resistance, but community awareness was growing. Allies were stepping forward, and a crucial connection had been made to the mayor's office. The quiet discomfort of Oak Creek was starting to find its voice, challenging the weight of the uniform and the silence that often protected it. The question now was whether those ripples could gather enough force to become a wave. Lena Petrova didn't waste time. She cross-referenced Aaliyah's IA complaint number, pulled the preliminary report, noting Detective Wilson's skeptical tone, and reviewed the nascent digital chatter from the Oak Creek Facebook group, including Agnes Albright's significant post. She also did a quick personnel file check on officers Wilson and Davis. Wilson had several prior complaints, mostly for excessive force or verbal abuse, all ultimately dismissed or handled with minor reprimands. Davis was newer, cleaner record, but often paired with Wilson. A familiar pattern. Lena walked into Mayor Olivia Thompson's spacious office overlooking the city skyline. Mayor Thompson, a former prosecutor with sharp political instincts and a genuine, if sometimes calculated, commitment to social justice, looked up from a stack of budget reports. "What's the fire drill now, Lena?" she asked, rubbing her temples. "Potential brush fire in Oak Creek," Lena said, placing a concise memo on the mayor's desk. "CPD stop, Black woman jogger, resident, professional, senior planner in our own planning department, actually. Name's Aaliyah Johnson. The mayor's eyebrows shot up. One of ours? Go on. Lena summarized the incident, Aaliyah's complaint, the dismissive IA response, the corroborating witness statement from Agnes Albright, and the growing neighborhood concern online. The officers are Wilson and Davis. Wilson's got a history. IA seems to be slow walking it, standard procedure. Mayor Thompson scanned the memo, her expression hardening. A city planner. Jogging on her own street. Stopped for being suspicious. In Oak Creek, no less. The optics are terrible, Lena. Worse than terrible, it's just plain wrong. Agreed, Lena said. It plays into every negative stereotype about policing in this city, something we've been working hard to counteract. Sophia Ramirez is advising Ms. Washington. She reached out to me directly. The mayor tapped her pen on the desk. She knew Sophia Ramirez by reputation, tenacious, smart, not someone who brought frivolous claims. And Agnes Albright's name rang a bell. She was from one of Oak Creek's founding families. Her voice carried weight in that community. This isn't just about optics, the mayor said, though the political calculus was clearly part of her thinking. She was midway through her first term, and maintaining trust, particularly with communities of color and progressive white allies, was crucial for re-election and for achieving her broader policy goals. This is about accountability. If our officers are profiling residents, especially city employees, in their own neighborhoods, it undermines everything we claim to stand for. She looked at Lena. What's the play? Standard procedure would let IA take weeks, maybe months, Lena said. By which time, public interest fades, memories get fuzzy, and it likely gets buried. Alternative, we intervene. You call Chief Brody directly. Express your deep concern. Emphasize the potential damage to community relations. Insist on a swift and thorough investigation, reporting directly back to your office. Brody won't like it, the mayor mused. Police Chief Frank Brody was old school, fiercely protective of his department, and often resistant to perceived political interference. He'll call it meddling. Let him, Lena said coolly. He answers to you. And frankly, this kind of incident makes his whole department look bad. It gives ammunition to critics calling for defunding or radical reform. Swift, decisive action now, holding his own officers accountable, could actually strengthen his position in the long run, even if he doesn't see it that way immediately. Mayor Thompson considered it. A direct intervention was risky. It could be seen as overreach, potentially alienating parts of the police union or conservative constituents. But letting it fester was also risky, potentially alienating the very communities she needed to govern effectively. And fundamentally, she believed Aaliyah Johnson had been wronged. All right, the mayor decided. Get Brody on the line. And Lena? Make sure IA understands this investigation is now on a very short leash, reporting directly to the chief, who will be reporting directly to me. I want answers by the end of the week. The call to Chief Brody was tense. Mayor Thompson was polite but firm, outlining the situation and her expectations. Brody pushed back, defending his officer's right to investigate suspicious activity, questioning the complainant's motives, citing IA protocols. Frank, the mayor interrupted, her voice dropping the pleasantries. This happened in Oak Creek to a city planner. We have a credible witness, an elderly long-term resident. The story is already circulating online. This isn't a routine complaint anymore. This is a community trust issue, and it reflects directly on your department's professionalism and my administration's commitment to equitable policing. I need this investigated thoroughly and quickly. No dragging feet. I expect a preliminary report on my desk by Friday. Understood. There was a pause on the other end. Brody knew when he was cornered. Understood, Mayor, he said, his voice tight. The effect was immediate. Within hours, Detective Wilson from IA called Aaliyah back. His tone was markedly different, respectful, serious. He asked if she and Mrs. Albright would be willing to come in for formal, recorded interviews the next day. He assured her Officer Wilson and Officer Davis would also be interviewed formally. Sophia accompanied Aaliyah to the interview. This time, it felt different. Detective Wilson asked detailed, probing questions, but they felt aimed at understanding the incident, not discrediting her. He listened intently, took copious notes. Agnes Albright, frail but resolute, gave her account separately, her clear memory and unwavering certainty adding significant weight. Meanwhile, Chief Brody, under pressure from the mayor's office, personally reviewed the case file, including Wilson's checkered history and the initial dismissive IA notes. He summoned Officers Wilson and Davis to his office. The details of that meeting remained confidential, but sources within the department later spoke of raised voices and a chief finally forced to confront a pattern he had perhaps preferred to ignore. Wilson was reportedly defensive, defiant. Davis was quieter, seemingly chastened. Lena Petrova kept the pressure on, checking in daily with Brody's office for updates. She knew that bureaucratic inertia was powerful. Constant vigilance was required to keep the wheels turning fast. By Friday afternoon, a preliminary report landed on Mayor Thompson's desk. It confirmed the key elements of Aaliyah's account corroborated by Agnes Albright. It noted the lack of any concrete, suspicious activity beyond Aaliyah's presence. It acknowledged Officer Wilson's history of similar complaints. While stopping short of definitive conclusions pending final review, the report painted a clear picture of racial profiling and unprofessional conduct. Mayor Thompson read the report, her expression grim. This was exactly what she had feared, but also what she had expected. The system had failed Aaliyah Johnson until political pressure forced it to work. Now came the crucial part, ensuring meaningful consequences and sending a clear message. Lena, she called her chief of staff back into the office. Draft a statement. We need to get ahead of this. Acknowledge the findings, announce disciplinary action, whatever Brody recommends, short of firing unless the final report justifies it, and outline concrete steps we're taking on bias training and accountability. And I want to meet with Ms. Washington personally. Soon, the mayor's gambit had worked. The system, prodded forcefully from the top, had moved with uncharacteristic speed. The question that lingered, however, was whether this swift action was an anomaly born of political expediency and fortunate circumstances, or if it signaled a genuine shift towards accountability within the city's power structures. For Aaliyah, waiting for the official outcome, the answer remained uncertain. The fast shutdown felt validating, yet also highlighted the extraordinary effort it took to achieve justice for something that should never have happened in the first place. The official announcement came swiftly, just as Mayor Thompson had dictated. A press release from the mayor's office, issued jointly with the police chief's office, a strategic move by Lena to ensure departmental buy-in, or at least public compliance, hit the news wires early Monday morning. It acknowledged the findings of the expedited internal affairs investigation into the stop of Aaliyah Johnson. It stated clearly that the stop did not follow departmental protocol regarding reasonable suspicion and that the conduct of the officers, particularly Officer Wilson, was unprofessional. It announced that Officer Wilson was suspended without pay for 30 days and would be required to undergo intensive remedial training in de-escalation, cultural competency, and implicit bias. Officer Davis received a formal reprimand in his file and was also mandated to attend the training, assigned to patrol with a different, senior field training officer for the next 6 months. The statement included quotes from both the mayor and Chief Brody. Mayor Thompson emphasized the city's commitment to fair and equitable policing, stating, "Racial profiling has no place in our city. Every resident deserves to feel safe in their own neighborhood, and Ms. Washington's experience underscores the urgent need for continued vigilance and reform within our police department. We must and we will do better." Chief Brody's quote was more measured but acknowledged the lapse. "We hold our officers to a high standard. When those standards are not met, swift and appropriate action must be taken. We are committed to learning from this incident and reinforcing training to prevent recurrence." Aaliyah read the press release on her phone, sitting beside Ben at their kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. A wave of complex emotions washed over her. Relief, certainly, that the officers faced consequences, that her experience was officially validated. Vindication that her voice, amplified by Agnes and Sophia and ultimately the mayor, had been heard. But underneath it all lingered a profound weariness and a sense of unease. "Suspended," Ben said, reading over her shoulder. "Not fired. Sophia warned us firing would be unlikely without prior sustained complaints or physical altercation," Aaliyah murmured. "Especially with union protections. Suspension and retraining, it's something. It's more than usually happens." "It is," Ben agreed. "And the public acknowledgement is huge." Brody eating crow alongside the mayor? That sends a message. But what message exactly? Aaliyah wondered. Was it a message of genuine change or a message of damage control? Was Officer Wilson truly going to be reformed by 30 days off and some mandatory classes, or would he just be back on the street, perhaps more careful but just as biased? Later that day, Aaliyah received a call from Lena Petrova inviting her and Ben to meet with Mayor Thompson at City Hall the following afternoon. Aaliyah hesitated, unsure what purpose it would serve, but Sophia urged her to go. "It's important for the mayor to see the human face of this," Sophia advised. And it's a chance for you to speak directly to power. The meeting took place in the mayor's formal conference room. Mayor Thompson greeted Aaliyah and Ben warmly, expressing her sincere regret for what Aaliyah had endured. Ms. Washington, the mayor said, her expression serious. I want to personally apologize for what happened to you. It was unacceptable. It violated not only departmental policy but the basic trust residents should have in their police force and their city government. Aaliyah met her gaze. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the apology and I appreciate the swift action your office took. But I have to ask, why did it happen so quickly this time? I know people file complaints all the time that go nowhere. Mayor Thompson didn't flinch. That's a fair question, she admitted. Several factors aligned here. Your willingness to file a formal complaint immediately. The courage of your neighbor, Mrs. Albright, to step forward as a witness. The advocacy of Ms. Ramirez. Your position within the city administration, frankly, raised internal flags faster than might otherwise happen. And yes, the potential for this to become a larger public issue played a role in prioritizing the investigation. None of that excuses the initial failure, nor does it mean the system works as it should. It highlights how much more work we need to do to ensure every complaint is treated with this level of seriousness, regardless of who is involved or who is watching. She outlined the steps her office was taking, reviewing IA procedures, expanding implicit bias training, exploring community oversight initiatives. It sounded promising, but Aaliyah knew the difference between policy proposals and tangible change on the street. What I went through, Aaliyah said quietly but firmly, the fear, the humiliation, it stays with you. It changes how you see your own street, your own neighbors. I hope the training helps. I hope the suspension sends a message. But this isn't just about Officer Wilson and Officer Davis. It's about a culture that allows them to believe their actions were acceptable in the first place. Ben added, as a history teacher, Mayor, I see the long arc. These incidents aren't new. The speed of your response is somewhat new and appreciated. But the real test is whether that speed becomes the norm, not the exception triggered by a confluence of fortunate circumstances. The mayor nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. This can't be a one-off. Consider my office an ally in pushing for that systemic change. And Ms. Washington, if you ever experience anything like this again, or hear of others who do, my door is open. Walking out of City Hall, Aaliyah felt drained but resolute. The meeting hadn't offered easy answers, but the mayor's candor felt more meaningful than platitudes. In Oak Creek, the reaction to the news was mixed. The Facebook group lit up again. Many applauded the mayor's quick action and the consequences for the officers. Others defended the police, arguing the punishment was too harsh or that Aaliyah had overreacted. Agnes Albright posted simply, accountability is a good first step. Let's hope it leads to lasting change. A few days later, Aaliyah laced up her running shoes again. Standing at her front door, she hesitated for a moment. The familiar pavement of Elm Street looked different now, imbued with memory, with caution. Taking a deep breath, she stepped outside and started to run. Her rhythm was tentative at first, her senses on high alert. Every passing car made her jump slightly. She saw Mrs. Henderson on her porch, who offered a small, encouraging wave. She passed Mr. Gable's tomato patch. He gave her a thumbs up. As she rounded the bend near Willow Park, the spot where she'd been stopped, she deliberately kept her eyes forward, focusing on her breathing, reclaiming the space, footstep by footstep. She saw a police cruiser approaching in the distance. Her heart leaped into her throat, that cold prickle returning instantly. But the cruiser continued past her without slowing, the officers inside looking straight ahead. A small measure of relief, but the underlying tension remained. It would take time, she knew, for the feeling of safety, of belonging to fully return, if it ever did completely. Her run wasn't the same carefree release it had once been. It was now overlaid with awareness, with the knowledge of how quickly her sanctuary could be violated, how fragile her sense of place truly was. But she kept running. Because stopping meant letting fear win. Because running was her declaration, I belong here. This is my street too. The echoes of the encounter on Elm Street would linger, a reminder of the pervasive reality of racial bias. The mayor's swift intervention offered a glimmer of hope, a demonstration that accountability was possible, even if prompted by a specific set of circumstances. It wasn't a perfect resolution, not a sign that the system was fixed. Officer Wilson would be back. Bias training had its limits. The culture of policing was deeply entrenched, but something had shifted. A conversation had started in Oak Creek. An elderly white woman had found her voice. A black woman had refused to be silenced. A mayor had been forced to act. The lesson wasn't that justice was suddenly easy or guaranteed, but that it was worth fighting for, demanding, documenting. It was in the reporting, the witnessing, the advocating, the holding of power to account that was where the possibility of change resided. Aaliyah continued her run, the rhythm steadier now, carrying not just the weight of her own experience, but the weight of that ongoing struggle, mile after weary, determined mile. The fight for true social justice wasn't a sprint, she knew. It was a marathon. And she was back on the course.